My name is Carol Ann Washington, and I want to tell you something that took me 61 years to understand. The most dangerous thing a mother can do is love her child more than she loves herself. Not because love is dangerous. Love is the finest thing I have ever known. But when a mother pours every drop of herself into a child and forgets to keep even a small reserve for her own living, something breaks that is very hard to fix. I know this because I lived it. I know this because I was that mother, and my daughter was that child. And the day I finally stopped answering her calls was the day I began to find out who I actually was underneath all those years of sacrifice. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, the second of 5 children raised by a woman named Dorothy Mae Washington, who worked the morning shift at a hotel laundry for 26 years. My father left when I was 4. I do not remember him clearly, just a shape in a doorway, the smell of cigarette smoke, and then nothing. My mother never complained about his leaving. She simply adjusted, the way a plant adjusts to whatever light it gets, bending toward whatever warmth is available and making the best of what remains. Mama had a saying she repeated so often it became a kind of music in our house. A Washington woman does what needs doing. It was not a proud saying. It was not a boastful saying. It was simply a description of reality, delivered with the flat certainty of someone who had tested it against every difficulty life had offered and found it to be true. A Washington woman does what needs doing. She gets up early. She stays up late. She stretches a dollar until it cries. She does not ask for help, because asking for help requires believing that help exists. And in the world my mother moved through, help was a luxury reserved for people with different last names. I carried that saying with me the way I carried my mother's face, always present, always watching, always measuring me against some quiet internal standard. I was 22 years old when my daughter Vanessa was born, and I was 22 years and 3 months old when her father, Marcus, told me he was not ready to be a parent and drove away in a red Chevrolet that I never saw again. I stood on the sidewalk outside our apartment in South Memphis, holding an infant car seat with my daughter asleep inside it, and I thought, a Washington woman does what needs doing. So I did. I worked at a grocery store during the day and took bookkeeping classes at the community college at night. Vanessa went to my mother's house while I studied, and my mother fed her and bathed her and sang to her the same songs she had sung to me. And when I picked Vanessa up at 10 o'clock at night, my daughter would reach for me with both arms and say, "Mama," in a voice so sweet and so complete that I would forget for a moment how tired I was. By the time Vanessa started kindergarten, I had my bookkeeping certificate and a job at a small accounting firm on Union Avenue. It was not glamorous work, filing, data entry, reconciling accounts for small businesses, but it paid $12 an hour in 1992, which was enough to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where the school was decent and the streets were quiet enough. I bought Vanessa a purple backpack for her first day of school. She carried it like it was made of gold. Vanessa was, from the very beginning, extraordinary. I do not say this as a mother's blind flattery. I say it as a woman who watched her child carefully and saw something unusual taking shape. She was curious in a way that went beyond what was required. She asked questions that had no easy answers. She read everything she could get her hands on. She would come home from school and explain things to me, history, science, math, with a patience and clarity that made me feel I was the student and she was the teacher. By the time she was 10 years old, I had understood that she was going somewhere I had never been, and I made a private decision that nothing in my power would stand in her way. That decision shaped the next 20 years of my life. I took extra shifts. I declined invitations. I stopped buying myself things, new clothes, small treats, anything that was not strictly necessary, and redirected every spare dollar toward Vanessa. Tutoring when she needed it. Piano lessons because she had shown an interest and I believed in giving children what they reach for. Science camp in the summer. A computer when she was 12, the year computers began to matter. I watched the balance in my checking account the way a sailor watches weather, always alert, always calculating. My social life narrowed. My friendships thinned. My coworkers invited me to happy hours and birthdays and holiday dinners, and I smiled and said I had plans because my plans were always Vanessa, helping with homework, attending school events, driving her to activities, lying awake at night running numbers in my head and figuring out how to make the following month work. I was not unhappy. I want to be clear about that. I was not unhappy. I was focused. I had a purpose so large it filled every corner of my life, and in those years, that felt like enough. When Vanessa was accepted to Vanderbilt University on a partial scholarship, I sat in our kitchen and cried for 45 minutes. Not from sadness. From the sheer relief of it, the confirmation that all those years of calculation and sacrifice had added up to something real, something that could not be taken away. My daughter was going to Vanderbilt. My daughter, whose father had driven away in a red Chevrolet, whose grandmother had washed hotel linens for a living, whose mother had spent 22 years doing whatever needed doing. My daughter was going to one of the finest universities in the country. The partial scholarship covered tuition, but not room and board, not books, not the 100 small expenses that come with college life. I covered the rest. I took out a small personal loan the first year. I picked up freelance bookkeeping work on weekends. I moved to a smaller apartment and reduced my own expenses to the minimum. Vanessa called every Sunday and told me about her classes, her professors, her friends. She was thriving. I could hear it in her voice, that particular fullness that comes from being exactly where you are supposed to be. After Vanderbilt came medical school, Duke University, another partial scholarship, another enormous expense. I was 47 years old at this point, and my body was beginning to register all those years of insufficient sleep and skipped meals. My knees ached. I had developed high blood pressure, which my doctor treated with mild medication and stern advice about stress. I did not tell Vanessa about the blood pressure. She had enough to focus on. She was studying to become a doctor. She was going to save lives. I was not going to distract her with my joints. The medical school years were the hardest financially. I had depleted most of my savings by the end of Vanderbilt, and Duke's costs were significant even with the scholarship. I borrowed from my retirement account, a decision that financial advisors will tell you is almost always a mistake, and they are almost always right. I took a second job doing bookkeeping for a restaurant group that needed someone flexible and reliable. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that, when Vanessa graduated and began her residency, things would stabilize. Vanessa graduated from Duke Medical School on a warm May afternoon, and I sat in the audience in a dress I had bought specifically for the occasion. The first piece of clothing I had purchased for myself in almost 2 years, and I watched my daughter walk across that stage and receive her diploma, and I thought, this is what all of it was for. She was beautiful that day, radiant. She hugged me afterward and said, "Mama, I couldn't have done any of this without you." And I believed her completely, because it was true, and because in that moment I did not yet understand that hearing those words was not the same as being treated as if they were true. The trouble began gradually, the way most important things begin. Not with a single dramatic moment, but with a slow accumulation of small moments that you tell yourself don't mean anything, until the accumulation becomes impossible to ignore. Vanessa matched into a residency program in Chicago, which was where she met Dr. Philip Harrington. Philip came from old Chicago money. His father was a cardiologist. His mother sat on the boards of 3 nonprofits. His family had a lake house in Wisconsin and a tradition of summer vacations in Italy. He was handsome and charming and clearly intelligent, and when Vanessa brought him to Memphis the first Christmas after they started dating, he shook my hand warmly and said, "Mrs. Washington, Vanessa has told me so much about you. It's wonderful to finally meet." I liked him that Christmas. I want to be honest about that. I liked his ease and his confidence and the way he looked at my daughter with a kind of quiet pride that seemed genuine. And Vanessa seemed happy in a way that was different from her medical school happiness. This was a softer happiness, a settled happiness. They married 2 years later, in a ceremony at a hotel in the Gold Coast neighborhood of Chicago that cost more than I had earned in any single year of my life. Philip's family paid for most of it, which I was grateful for, though there was also something disorienting about sitting in that ballroom surrounded by people I didn't know, in a world so far from South Memphis that it might as well have been a different planet. I sat at a table near the back with Vanessa's college roommate and her husband, and I watched my daughter move through the room in a dress that had cost $4,000, laughing and hugging and accepting congratulations, and I told myself the distance I felt was just the strangeness of the occasion. After the wedding, the calls became less frequent. This was understandable. Vanessa was finishing her residency, which was grueling. She and Philip were settling into their life together. She was busy in the way that young professionals with demanding careers are busy, completely, legitimately, comprehensively. I adjusted my expectations. I called on Sundays and we talked for 20 or 30 minutes, which was less than before but still meaningful. I kept up with her life through those calls and through social media, where Vanessa had begun to post photographs of their life in Chicago, dinners at beautiful restaurants, weekend trips, the gradual furnishing of a stunning apartment on the North Side. I noticed in those photographs that she looked different. Not different in a bad way, she was still beautiful, still clearly herself. But something in the way she held herself had changed. She stood differently in that world. She wore clothes I didn't recognize, had her hair done in ways I hadn't seen before, carried herself with an ease that came from belonging somewhere new and being comfortable in that belonging. I was proud of her. I want to say that clearly. I was proud of every bit of it. My daughter had built a life that I could not have imagined for her when she was a baby in a car seat on a Memphis sidewalk. She had done it through extraordinary effort and ability. I was proud. But I also began to notice things I didn't know how to name. The first time Philip's mother called her Vanessa Harrington in a Facebook post, Vanessa liked the comment. This was a small thing. I told myself it was a small thing. The first time I visited them in Chicago, I took a bus because the plane ticket felt extravagant. Vanessa picked me up from the station and drove me to their apartment, and I noticed that she apologized for the apartment before we went inside, the way you apologize for something you are embarrassed by. The apartment was beautiful. I did not understand what she was apologizing for until we were inside, and I saw it through her eyes. The space that was beautiful and curated and carefully assembled, and me, in my J.C. Penney coat and my sensible shoes, standing in the middle of it. She had made plans for us to have dinner with Philip and two of their couple friends that Saturday night, a restaurant on Michigan Avenue, where the cheapest entree was $42. I wore the nicest thing I had brought. The other women at the table wore things that cost more than my monthly rent. I was not uncomfortable. I had long ago made my peace with not having much, but I could feel Vanessa monitoring me across the table, watching me, checking in small, quiet ways to see if I was going to do something that needed correcting. She corrected me once that weekend. I used a word, I said something was ghetto, using it the way people in Memphis used it, as a general descriptor for something rundown or poorly made. And Vanessa touched my arm and said quietly, "Mama, we don't really use that word anymore." The we in that sentence was not me and her. The we was her and Philip and their friends and the world they had built together. I was not part of the we. I went home on the bus and sat in my small apartment in Memphis and thought about that we for a long time. Over the following 2 years, the pattern became clearer. Vanessa called less often, every 2 or 3 weeks instead of every week. When she called, the conversations had a particular texture, polished, careful, pleasant on the surface, but shallow in a way that was different from before. She asked about my health, my work, whether I was eating well. She told me about her practice, which had grown significantly. She was a pediatric cardiologist now, with a reputation that was growing in the Chicago medical community. She told me about vacations she and Philip took, restaurants they discovered, events they attended. She did not ask about my inner life. She did not ask what I was thinking or feeling or hoping for. She did not ask about my memories of her childhood, or what I dreamed about, or whether I was lonely, which I was, though I would not have admitted it to her, because I had trained myself for so many years not to burden her with my own interior weather. The invitation to Philip's parents' anniversary party came in the mail, an actual printed invitation on heavy cream cardstock, addressed to Carol Washington. The party was in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, at the Harrington family lake house. It was a weekend affair with a formal dinner on Saturday evening. The dress code said cocktail attire. I called Vanessa when the invitation arrived. "I got the invitation to the Harringtons' anniversary party," I said. "It looks beautiful. I'm not sure I can make it. The travel and the hotel are a bit much for me right now, but I wanted to ask if you wanted me there." There was a pause before she answered, a pause I felt in my chest. "Of course I want you there, Mama," she said. "But you know, it's really more of a Harrington family thing. They're friends, their world. It might be a little, you might feel out of place." I might feel out of place. My daughter, who had slept in my bed during thunderstorms until she was 8 years old, who had eaten my cooking every day for 18 years, who had called me crying from her first week at Vanderbilt because she was homesick and overwhelmed. My daughter was telling me I might feel out of place at a family gathering. "I understand," I said, and I hung up the phone and sat very still for a very long time. That was the first crack, not a break, a crack. I still called. I still sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts chosen carefully within my budget. I still prayed for her every night with the same fierce love I had always had. But something had shifted in me, some internal balance had tipped, and I began, for the first time, to look at our relationship with clear eyes instead of the eyes of hope. What I saw was this. My daughter had built a new identity, and in that new identity, I was a complication. I was the reminder of where she had come from, the South Memphis apartment, the grocery store job, the bus rides and the stretched dollars and the J.C. Penney coat. I was the evidence of a past that did not fit the narrative of who she was now. I was not someone she was ashamed of, exactly. It was more precise than that. I was someone she had outgrown, and she did not know how to hold both the person she had become and the person who had made her becoming possible. I do not say this with bitterness. I want to be clear about that. I say it with the particular sorrow of someone who understands something true about another person and wishes, deeply, that it were not true. The breaking point came on a Sunday in October. I know it was October because I had just put out a small pumpkin on my doorstep, a habit I had kept up for years because Vanessa had loved Halloween as a child, and I still bought pumpkins the way you maintain rituals that connect you to happier times. I was sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee when my phone rang, and it was Vanessa, and her voice was bright and purposeful in a way that I recognized as the voice she used when she needed something. "Mama, I wanted to ask you something. Philip and I are going to Italy in February, Florence mostly, and then a few days in Rome. His parents are coming, and we were thinking it would be really lovely if you could join us for part of it, maybe just Florence." My heart lifted, really. Yes, the thing is, Philip's mother gets a little nervous traveling. She has some anxiety about airports and things, and I thought it would be helpful to have someone there who could, keep her company during some of the days when Philip and I are at a conference. His father will be busy with colleagues a lot of the time, and I don't want her to feel stranded. I set down my coffee cup. She wanted me to come to Italy to be a companion for her mother-in-law. Not because she missed me. Not because she wanted to share something beautiful with the woman who had made her life possible. Because she needed someone to keep Philip's anxious mother company while the important people did important things. I was quiet for long enough that Vanessa said, "Mama, are you there?" "I'm here," I said. "What do you think? It would be Florence, Mama. You've always wanted to go to Europe." She was right. I had always wanted to go to Europe. I had mentioned it to her once, years ago, in the context of dreams I had set aside. The places I would go someday, when things were more stable, when I had the time and money that kept not materializing. She had filed it away and pulled it out now, not as a gift, but as a tool. "Vanessa," I said, and then I stopped. Because there were so many things I could have said in that moment, and I was not sure which one was right, and I needed a moment to find it. "Mama, is everything okay?" "I'm going to call you back," I said, and I hung up. I sat in that kitchen for 2 hours. I sat with the pumpkin on my doorstep and the October light coming through the window and 38 years of love and sacrifice laid out in my memory like a landscape I had been walking through without ever stopping to look at it. I thought about the bookkeeping classes at night, the personal loan, the retirement account I had raided, the second job, the clothes I had not bought, the trips I had not taken, the friends I had let drift away, because I was always too tired or too broke or too consumed with the endless work of making sure Vanessa had what she needed. And I thought about what she needed from me now, at the end of all of that. She needed me to fly to Italy on my own dime and keep a nervous woman company so that the important people could attend their conference in peace. I opened my phone and I looked at Vanessa's contact page. Her professional photo, taken by a photographer, polished and confident, Dr. Vanessa Harrington in a white coat with her stethoscope and her beautiful face. And I thought about that little girl with the purple backpack. I thought about Sunday mornings in Memphis when we ate biscuits and watched old movies. I thought about the year she was 12 and got pneumonia, and I slept on the floor of her room for a week so I would wake up if she needed me. And then I put my phone in my pocket, and I did not call her back. That was the Sunday I stopped answering. Not permanently, not forever, but I stopped answering in the way I had always answered, immediately, completely, rearranging myself to fit whatever shape was needed. I let her call go to voicemail that Sunday evening. I let Monday pass without responding to her text. I let Tuesday come and go. By Wednesday, Vanessa had called 3 times and texted twice, and the messages had progressed from casual to concerned to something approaching agitated. "Mama, please call me. I'm starting to worry." I was not trying to punish her. I want to be very clear about that. I was not being strategic or manipulative or playing games. I was simply, for the first time in 38 years, taking time that belonged to me. Time to think. Time to feel. Time to figure out what I actually wanted, not what she needed, not what the situation required, but what I, Carol Ann Washington, actually wanted from the remaining years of my life. What I discovered, in those quiet days, surprised me. I had friends I had neglected. My coworker Ruth had invited me to her book club 4 times over the past 2 years, and I had declined each time because Sunday evenings were when Vanessa called, and I did not want to miss her. My neighbor Glenda had suggested we take a day trip to Chattanooga in the spring, and I had said maybe, and then never followed up, and Glenda had eventually stopped asking. My cousin Loretta in Nashville had a spare room and had been asking me to visit for 3 years. I called Ruth and said yes to book club. I knocked on Glenda's door and said I was ready for Chattanooga. I called Loretta and said I was coming in November. I also, for the first time in years, sat down and looked honestly at my finances. The picture was not good. The retirement account withdrawal had never been repaid. My savings were thin enough for emergencies, not enough for comfort or choice. I had given so much of my financial energy to Vanessa's education that I had neglected to build the kind of foundation that would make my own later years feel secure. I called a financial counselor named James Whitmore, who was recommended by a woman at my church. James spent 2 hours going through my accounts with the gentle efficiency of someone who has seen many people in similar situations. At the end, he said, "Ms. Washington, the good news is that you have time and you have options, but we need to start now, and we need to make sure there are no more significant outflows." I had not given Vanessa money directly in years. She certainly didn't need it, but I had been spending money on her in other ways. Gifts that were larger than my budget warranted. The bus ticket to Chicago and back. Contributions toward occasions that were framed as family events but were really Harrington family events with me as an afterthought. James helped me see the total clearly, and the total, while not devastating, was more than I had been willing to acknowledge. I made a budget, my first real budget in years, one that accounted for my own wants as well as my needs. I put money into a travel account, not for Italy to companion Philip's mother, but for places I had always wanted to go. New Orleans, the Smoky Mountains. Eventually, yes, Europe, but on my own terms, in my own time, for my own pleasure. Vanessa finally reached me on Friday of that first silent week. I answered. She asked immediately if I was all right, and I said I was fine, and then there was a pause during which I could feel her recalibrating. "You had me worried," she said. "I'm sorry to have worried you," I said. "I needed some time to think." About what? I had thought about how to answer this question many times during the week. I had rehearsed several versions, the gentle version, the diplomatic version, the version that avoided conflict. But sitting in my kitchen on that Friday evening with the honesty of a quiet week behind me, I found I did not want the diplomatic version anymore. "About us," I said. "About our relationship. About the Italy invitation and what it said about how you see me. About the anniversary party and you telling me I might feel out of place. About the dinner in Chicago when you monitored me across the table to make sure I didn't embarrass you. About all of it, Vanessa. I've been thinking about all of it. The silence on the other end was long and complex. I waited. Mama, she said finally, I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I wasn't monitoring you. You were just managing me, I said quietly. The same way you manage a situation that might become complicated. I was a complication to be managed, Vanessa, and I think I have been for a while. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. And I think you know it's true, or you wouldn't have gone quiet when I said it. Another long silence. I love you, she said, and I could hear, underneath the words, something real, something that had not gone anywhere, regardless of everything else. I love you too, I said. I have loved you every single day of your life, including the days when you were not easy to love. But Vanessa, love is not the question. The question is respect. The question is whether I am a person to you, a full, real, complicated person, or whether I am a role. The mama role. Useful in certain contexts, slightly inconvenient in others, best managed from a comfortable distance. She was crying. I could hear it. I don't want you to be a role, she said. I don't, Mama. I know what you did for me. I know what you gave up. I know it. Then act like it, I said, not harshly, just clearly. We talked for 2 hours that night. It was not a comfortable conversation. There were places where we both said things that were hard to say and hard to hear. Vanessa talked about the pressure of moving between worlds, the world she came from and the world she now inhabited, and how hard it was to hold both at once without feeling torn apart. She talked about Philip's family and their expectations, and how easy it was to let those expectations shape her behavior in ways she hadn't fully examined. She cried in a way she hadn't cried in front of me in years. I talked about the years. Not as an accusation, I was careful about that, but as a simple account of what had been. The bookkeeping classes, the second job, the retirement account, the clothes I hadn't bought. I said, I did all of that because I loved you and because I believed in you. But I am 61 years old and I have not finished living, and I will not spend whatever time I have left waiting by the phone to be useful to you in ways that work for your schedule. What do you want, Mama? She asked. And the question landed differently than it had ever landed before, not as a formality, but as a genuine inquiry, as if the answer actually mattered. I want to be your mother, I said. Not your background, not your past, not the woman you call when you need something managed. Your mother, the person who knows you better than anyone in the world and loves you in a way that has nothing to do with what's convenient. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I want that too. I think I forgot how to want it. I got so busy building something that I forgot to maintain something. It was the most honest thing she had said to me in years. The months that followed were not a transformation. I want to be clear about that, because stories often want to offer transformation. The clean before and after, the moment of reckoning followed by the permanent repair. Real life is messier than that. Real life is two people with a complicated history trying to build something new from the same old materials, and sometimes it works beautifully, and sometimes it goes sideways, and mostly it is simply ongoing, imperfect, and real and alive. What changed was this. Vanessa started calling every week again. Not the polished, managed calls of the previous few years, but real calls where she told me things that were hard, where she asked for my opinion and actually listened to the answer, where we laughed about old memories and fought gently about small things and made up immediately. She told me about the pressures of her practice, the complexity of her marriage, the quiet grief she carried about not yet having children. Things she had kept from me, thinking she was protecting me, not understanding that what she was actually doing was keeping me at a distance. She came to Memphis for Thanksgiving that year. Just her, Philip went to his family's, and for the first time in years, it was just me and Vanessa in my kitchen, cooking the dishes my mother had taught me, eating at the table where she had done her homework as a child. We talked for 10 hours straight. We went to bed at 2 in the morning. We woke up and made coffee and kept talking. On the last day of her visit, before she drove to the airport, she stood in my living room and looked around at my small apartment. The furniture I had kept for 20 years, the photographs on the walls, the pumpkin still on the doorstep that I hadn't gotten around to putting away, and she said, "Mama, I want to help you fix this place up. Not because it isn't fine, but because you deserve a space that feels like it belongs to you, not the stripped-down version of you, the full version." I looked at her. "Vanessa, I don't need." "I know you don't need it," she said. "I want to do it, because I can, and because I should have wanted to do it a long time ago, and because you spent 38 years making sure I had everything I needed, and I want to spend some time making sure you do too." She was crying again. I was crying. We stood there in my living room crying over the state of my second-hand furniture, and it was the most real we had been with each other in years. I let her help, not because I needed saving. I want to be clear about that, but because accepting help gracefully is also something a person can learn, and I was 61 years old, and it was past time I learned it. She hired a painter for the kitchen and helped me pick a color, a warm terracotta that neither of us could have predicted, but that turned out to be exactly right. She found a beautiful second-hand sofa at an estate sale and drove it to Memphis herself. She bought me a proper coffee maker, the kind with the grinder built in, because she knew I drank coffee every morning and she wanted it to be good coffee. And once, on a Saturday afternoon when the apartment was full of sunlight and the smell of fresh paint, and we were both tired in a good way from moving furniture, Vanessa sat down on the floor with a cup of my new coffee and looked up at me and said, "Mama, tell me about when I was little. Tell me something I don't know." So I told her. I told her about the purple backpack and the night she was born and the way she used to say "Mama" in the dark. I told her about the grocery store and the bookkeeping classes and the feeling of picking her up at my mother's house at 10 o'clock at night and having her reach for me with both arms. I told her about the day she got into Vanderbilt and how I cried for 45 minutes in the kitchen. I told her about the quiet years when I had been so focused on giving her everything that I had forgotten to keep anything for myself, and how I was still figuring out what it meant to keep things for myself, and how it was harder than I had expected and also better. She listened to all of it without interrupting, and when I was finished, she said, "I want you to write it down, all of it, because when I have children one day, I want them to know who their grandmother is, not the grandmother in the background, the real one." So I am writing it down. My name is Carol Ann Washington. I am 61 years old. I am a bookkeeper. I am the daughter of Dorothy Mae Washington, who worked the morning shift at a hotel laundry for 26 years and taught me that a Washington woman does what needs doing. I am the mother of Dr. Vanessa Harrington, who is one of the finest pediatric cardiologists in Chicago and one of the most complicated and wonderful people I have ever known. I raised her alone, from a sidewalk in South Memphis, on $12 an hour and determination and love. I gave her everything I had. And then I spent a long time forgetting to give anything to myself. And then, at 61, sitting in my kitchen with a pumpkin on the doorstep and the phone not ringing, I remembered. I went to Chattanooga with Glenda in the spring. It was beautiful, the river, the mountains, the way the light moved through the Tennessee Valley in the afternoon. I ate a meal I had not cooked and drank wine I had not planned to drink and laughed more than I had laughed in years. I went to Loretta's in Nashville in November, and we stayed up late talking about our childhood and our mother, and all the things that had made us who we were. I went to book club with Ruth every other Sunday, and argued pleasantly about novels I would not have read otherwise. I am planning a trip to New Orleans in the spring, not for anyone else, for the food and the music and the light, and because I have always wanted to go, and there is no longer any reason to wait. Vanessa and I talk every Sunday. Sometimes it is 20 minutes and sometimes it is 2 hours. She tells me hard things now, and easy things and funny things, and I do the same. Last month she told me she was pregnant, 8 weeks, still early, still tentative, and she cried when she said it and I cried when I heard it. And for a moment I could hear, underneath all the years and the complications and the distance we had traveled away from each other and back, the sound of a girl reaching for me in the dark with both arms. I am going to be a grandmother, and I am going to be a grandmother who is fully present, fully real, fully herself, not a background figure, not a convenience, not a role. A person. The whole complicated, proud, tired, hopeful, still becoming person I have always been. Dorothy Mae Washington told me a woman does what needs doing. She was right. But what I know now, that she could not have told me, is that what needs doing includes yourself, your own life, your own joy, your own quiet Saturday mornings with good coffee and no agenda and all the time in the world to simply be. I should have started sooner, but I have started, and that, I have decided, is enough.